Mary Sherlock. I was born in Tyquin, Cornerstone, on the 14th of November 1921.
And everybody knows you as
Maisie.
Maisie. And when did you get that name?
I don't know. My mother gave it to me, I suppose. My parents.
And we were looking at a photograph that you have in your house of the school that you went to, Tyquin National School.
National School. And I went to Tyquin National School the first day it was opened.
And when was that?
School. Well, it must be about 1926.
1926, yes. And this photograph we have of you as a young girl is from 28, 29.
Oh, yeah.
And you're in the photograph, your sister?
My sister Nora, Lord Mercer, and myself. And I don't, the rest of us don't, I don't see my other sister there at the moment.
But all your neighbours are in it, the
My
Carpenters
neighbours,
and the
yes,
Finnertys and
I tell you
Manions.
now, it was from the third, it seems to be from third class to
Senior
sixth.
class, yes,
Yeah.
okay. And what was it like growing up in those days in Tyquin, a small rural community?
It was very quiet, I suppose, really, compared to life nowadays. But it was enjoyable. And then my grandmother lived not too well. We had my father's mother lived with us, but my mother's mother came from Doon, lived in Doon and Cornerstone, and I used to be down there a lot when I was young.
And is that far from your own home?
It was about 2 miles.
2 miles, yes.
Yeah.
And in those days you would walk?
Down across the bog most of the time. And then I graduated to a bicycle after a while.
Very good. And how old were you when you got your bicycle?
Well, I don't know exactly. I suppose it must have been, well, it was a bicycle shared by the family.
Yes, yes.
I suppose I was 12 or 13.
Okay.
When I learned to cycle. And it was nice, really.
So when you got up in the morning, what would you have for breakfast?
Well, we used to, much the same as we have now.
Porridge.
We have a boiled egg or porridge.
Yeah.
And always plenty of milk.
Okay. So your home was a farm then. You had,
it was.
Yeah. So what was that took place on the farm?
Well, we had we had tillage and a few cattle. It was a small farm now. Because I remember my father used to go to work for the county council as well at times, labouring.
Yes.
But they were building new roads and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And here we used to work on the road a bit.
Yes.
And so the farm wasn't that big. It took all his time.
So you had tillage, and what type of crops now would you have? Barley?
No, I don't remember barley. We had oats and potatoes, of course. And the vegetables.
Yeah.
Turnips. And
so you were self-sufficient.
Yeah. Carrots and parsnips and cabbage.
And would you have a pig?
Oh, we had a few pigs always.
So you'd slaughter them for your own use.
Yeah. And we used to have a sow at times, and
yes,
they'd be bottoms for a while, and they'd be sold off, and maybe one or two kept.
And where was the local market then to sell your product? In Athenry, so the market there.
Yeah.
Yes. So you also, when you had pigs, as you say, you had oats and you had poultry. Then I think
we had hens and chickens and a few geese and
geese
and turkeys always for Christmas.
Always turkeys. So even from the early days, you would have turkeys. You know.
Yeah.
So you would have for Christmas dinner now. You would have turkey.
Funny enough, it was mostly geese. A goose we'd have at Christmas. It was later on the turkey became fashionable. I don't know, was it that they had thought they were too expensive or what it was, but they preferred the goose anyway.
And your main livestock, would it be cattle or sheep or a bit of both?
A bit of everything.
A bit of both itself, you know.
We'd have a horse, maybe, and a pony.
Okay, and that would be pony and trap going into.
Well, we should have had a pony and trap, but we didn't have it.
Okay, so you just walked to the Monivea or whatever, yes.
Yeah, or cycled. But my grandmother, then I used to be. my uncle was living there, and my aunt, who was an invalid, she was, as they used to say, delicate, a lot of us, and she was, you were saying, my Aunt Ellie. And I had an uncle, Darby, who should have been married, but he didn't get married until later in life. And I'd been able to go down there after from school, you know. And I was down there for a couple of years before I went nursing. And I had another uncle, Johnny, the Lord of rest him. He was worked in the buildings and that. He was a plasterer. He was about 6'3" in height.
Tall man.
He had a motorbike, and he was a wonderful person.
Yeah.
And he was to say to me, "No, he said, don't stay here because they'll marry you after summer farmer later on, and go over. When Nora comes home, I'll be ready to go over and nursing with them."
Yeah, and Nora was your sister based in
London.
In London itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did decide one year to go
So
over to England.
that's
Yeah,
why
you took us.
Johnny
Yeah,
pushed me to go
very
like,
good.
and encouraged me,
Yes,
and gave me money as well. Like,
yeah, to
he was
help
a
you.
great man for helping me with money.
So this was it was 1943. Then you decided to go to England.
Yes, Nora was home, as I said, for Christmas.
Yes.
And we set off on New Year's Day in 1943. There were no planes that time, it was by boat.
Yeah.
We had to stay in Dublin for the night and then after in the morning.
Would you have gone into Galway City and got the train?
No, Athenry.
Oh, you went to Athenry, of course, and took the train. And where did you travel from then? Over by boat to Holyhead, was it?
Yes,
Yeah. And then went to London, you know. And what was the experiences like? It was the middle of the war. They had blackouts and there were still bombings.
I remember Nora left me to the gate of the hospital. She had worked there before.
Yes.
And she was now in Greenwich and St. Helfriges. And I remember being so impressed by the reception I got, because they were absolutely lovely people.
Yes.
And even the porter at the gate, like, made me welcome and brought me up to the nurse's home, and I met the home sister. It was at night time at this stage, and I never really looked back after that.
It must have been a big shock to you, come from a small rural community in the west of Ireland to go to a big city like London.
Well, it wasn't the big city, funny enough. It was on the outskirts. It was beside a military hospital.
Okay.
The Herbert Hospital.
Herbert Hospital, you know.
And there were several military
installations there, bases.
There.
Yeah.
There was the depot and different places anyway.
Yes.
But
and were your patients from the military or were they civilians?
Oh no, I had civilians.
Yeah, civilians, you know.
So,
and would you have handled, say, casualties from bombings, or what type of patients were they?
Well,
or mixed?
It was fever training I was doing there.
Okay, fever training.
So
okay.
We didn't have
the casualties.
Is that Gabriel? I see it is.
So tell us about one incident that happened when you were working the telephone exchange at the time one night.
That's where I always worked a night duty.
Yes.
And anyway, it was as I explained, it was the old-fashioned ones where you had to plug in the things on.
Yes.
And there was one hanging on the wall and to use an emergency.
Okay.
If there was there was an alert, meaning that the Germans were over, they were coming. And I picked up the thing and announced where before that they had dropped the bomb, and this chimney came through the place of the roof of the. I have to order it home in writing, because I got a thing from County Hall afterwards, and it was all there. And
so you alerted everybody in
all I had to do was pick up this emergency phone and give them the name of the place, and I could hardly speak. My voice, I had no voice left of the shock of this chimney coming through the roof, which could have hit me on the top of the head. Anyway, that's what I was recommended for the George Medal for that.
Oh my God! And did you get the George Medal?
I didn't, but I got this letter
from the county hall.
If I'd known, I would have brought it in and shown. I still have all those things at all.
Yes.
Though they're a bit battered at the moment.
And what was social life like for a young Irish girl over in London at that time?
Well, there were plenty of Irish dance halls to go to, but
Yes.
I never went to a lot of them, to tell you the truth.
Yes, yes.
What did we do? We went to, what else did we do? I forget.
Would you go to the pictures, the cinema?
Yeah, yes, occasionally.
Yeah. And would you go as a group of girls?
Not really, no.
No.
One or two or three maybe.
Okay, small little groups,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
where were the Irish places there? Was in places like Cricklewood, or were they all over?
Garryowen.
Garryowen.
I remember.
Was that a pub or a dance hall?
Oh no, I never went to the pubs.
Okay,
no.
and what was Garryowen? A community centre?
It was an Irish
social club.
Social club.
Okay, yeah. But going back sorry, go on.
Dancing mostly.
Okay, was it Cayley's type of dancing?
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. And when you were growing up, though, just to go back to your youth, what would be a typical day in your life back in the 1920s when you were going to Tyquin National School? What time would you get up in the morning?
I don't know. Time for school at 9:30.
So you had to be in at 9:30.
Yeah.
And a lot of people tell me, from that era, that they found school very tough. There was corporal punishment, but you liked it. You thought the teacher was a really nice gentleman.
We had a lovely teacher.
Yeah, and his name was?
Mr. Rohan, Thomas Rohan, the Lord mercy. He was a really nice man, and very sparing with the rod.
Yeah, okay. So it was the rod that was the instrument of punishment.
Yeah, the stick.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed my school days anyway. And then I went to Athenry, the convent, the presentation.
Oh, you went to secondary school?
I did in Athenry.
Okay.
Cycled in, of course. Nora was going there as well. She continued on. I went to Tuam. I didn't. I was kept with the grandmother again, the Lord of mercy. And, well, it wasn't her fault now. But it was this aunt that wasn't well. I had to look after. And I got on well in the presentation and liked the nuns.
Yes.
We had a nun called Sister Xavier.
Yes.
And I remember she sent him to my father one time and telling him to be sure that send me on for further education. I was supposed to be bright.
That was very good. And you must have been unique to go on to secondary school. A lot of girls wouldn't have gone on.
Not a lot of them.
Yeah, that was excellent.
Yeah.
And they were the what order? Presentation. Okay,
yeah,
itself, And so in school, like in the Tyquin school, what were your subjects?
Well, I suppose reading, writing.
Yes. Irish and English.
Irish.
Yes.
English. And catechism, of course.
Catechism, of course, yeah.
And history and geography. Okay. And I remember Mr. Owen was a great man. When he'd get interested, like in history and that, he'd tell us a whole lot about it. Of course, we didn't listen as much as we should have done either, but he was great. And
did you do any games in the schoolyard?
No, I kind of forget now.
Yes.
But I remember going out and not organised, really.
Yeah.
What
just
did
playing.
We do? I forget playing.
And the boys and the girls would mix in the school. That there was no separate classrooms for boys and girls.
No, I think we all mixed together.
Okay. And sport, was there any sport for girls to play, camogie or anything?
No, not
like
at that time.
And the boys, did they do sport?
Well, they played the football and bit of hurling.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you went to Athenry, what was it like there?
It was lovely too. Well, I enjoyed Athenry.
And you did the same type of subjects?
Same type. And I left before I did my intermediate, of course.
Oh, you left before that?
Yes.
Yeah. Why did you leave?
Again, I was kept at my grandmother's.
And where did your grandmother live?
In Donan.
Oh,
which
Donan,
is the parish of Skehana.
Yes, Skehana, okay. So you looked after her.
Well, it wasn't my grandmother, it was my aunt who was the invalid.
Okay.
And
when you say she was invalid, what was her situation?
I don't know exactly
Yeah,
to tell you
yeah,
the truth, but
yes.
she wasn't able to get. I'd say it was more in the head than in the.
Okay,
But she was a very saintly person,
okay.
and she was, as they used to say, delicate.
Yeah, delicate. So you
And the
obviously,
doctor used to come, and the priest used to come. And
yes,
anyway, she died quite at about 50ish or so.
yeah. And was it then you decided to move?
It was just after that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
When your sister came back from England,
Yeah.
you know. So the two of you went. Was any of your other family emigrated?
No, not.
They all
not
actually
really.
stayed here
Yeah.
itself, you know. And what was
But my younger, I had there were 9 of us in family. Like.
9?
And
Okay.
Nora was the eldest, and I was the second.
Yes.
And the younger members of the family emigrated.
Emigrate as well. So
Yeah.
it was just accepted that people, when they became older teenagers, they would move abroad.
A lot of them did.
And would they have gone to England mainly?
Well, one sister went to America,
Yes.
and she's back home now, living in Athenry with her husband.
Okay.
She's not too well at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Sister younger than me.
Yeah. Yes.
And then I have a sister known in America,
Okay.
Sister Brendan, and then I have a brother in the home place.
Yes.
Out of once his wife died
Yes.
there last year, and he's kind of still mourning, you know.
Yes.
And
And quite a few went into the religious orders, because you were showing me the photograph. We were looking at the photograph from 28, 29. Quite a few became
Yeah.
nuns, yeah?
well, they were both Tessie Venerted, but
Yeah.
they were no relation.
No relation. And both became,
One was his next door neighbour, the Manions now,
Yeah.
Tessie Venerted,
yes,
and she became a nun in London,
yes.
and the other Tessie Venerted became a nun in France.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was fairly normal to be
It was,
the
there were
religious order.
a lot of people.
Now, in the 20s, when you were a child, what was Christmas like? Did you get presents?
Oh,
or
we
was,
did.
yeah,
Santa always came.
always
to us.
came. Santa did come.
He did.
Okay, yeah.
Always came.
And would you have a Christmas tree inside
No, we didn't have Christmas trees
at that time?
so
Yeah.
much,
And would you decorate the house?
Oh, we would.
with
Very
holly?
much so,
Was it?
holly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I remember my mother used to do a great job with the holly, you know,
Yes,
threading
yes.
it through.
And what was
putting
the
it
special
around.
food then you would have for Christmas dinner?
Turkey, and not turkey, goose.
Goose, yes.
Always, and
Yes.
plum pudding.
And plum pudding itself.
Usual.
And would you go to, it was Christmas Day Mass or the night before?
No, Christmas morning, early.
Christmas morning.
There was a midnight mass, if I remember right.
Okay.
Not in our local church, anyway,
Yes.
which was Newcastle or Garbley. Scahan, I mean. Scahan Church.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was, and you got presents. And where were the presents kept for the children when they woke up? Where would they be?
They were
Left.
around the chimney somewhere, anyway.
Okay. In socks would have been.
In socks,
Yeah, yeah. And your own clothing now, would you have, you would have purchased clothing in shops, or would you have made some of your
Oh,
own?
we knitted a lot of
Knitted a lot of your
jumpers
own, you
and
know.
stuff like that.
And would the older
Socks.
children pass it on to the younger children, some of their clothes?
They did indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in terms of when we talk about the religious, people were very religious at the time. The Stations of the Cross, would the stations be held in your house?
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
About every 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. So how did they work the stations?
Well, there was an awful lot of cleaning to be done, number one.
Right.
It started about 6 weeks beforehand.
Yeah.
Everything was painted and
Yes.
whitewashed and
Yeah.
all the rest of it.
And that was because all the local community would come
Yes.
to that house for
Yes.
that period.
And then
Yeah.
the mass, there was confessions.
Yes.
2 or 3 priests came.
Wow.
They were a lot more plentiful that time than they are now.
Yes.
And 2 priests and clerk usually with them.
Yes.
And then after the mass and and then sometimes I'd have to go to people who weren't able to come, like for anointing or that.
Yes.
And there'd be tea in the parlour or breakfast for the priest.
Yes.
And some of the locals in the better, higher class were brought down with the priest to have the breakfast, you know. There was always 1 or 2 people.
They were considered dignitaries, were they?
Well, kind of.
Yeah.
Maybe teachers or collectors.
Okay.
There was George Moore and the Lord of
Yes.
He was an Athlone man and he was married in Tagwin.
Yes.
And he was always very well in with the priest. Now he was a lovely man indeed.
Yes. Yes.
Lovely. And he'd always be down to have his breakfast. But then the neighbours would, in the meantime, they'd be given a cup of tea, but they'd
Yeah.
have their breakfast then.
Yes.
It went on all day.
Yes. Yes.
And then relations would come in the evening, and maybe the next day it would still go on.
Wow. And people would stay over maybe, or would they come back?
Oh, they'd come back.
They'd come back, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Now, and you had a bog locally, so there would be out
We had
collecting the turf in the summer.
we had bog quite near us,
Mm.
and so I spent some very happy days in the bog.
So the whole family would go out for the days, would they?
Well, it depended on if the ones who were able to work went
Yes.
out anyway.
Yes. Yes.
And it was very enjoyable because the weather seemed to be better than it is.
Long hot summers.
You know, yeah.
Yeah. And what would you bring with you? You'd bring the kettle to make the tea.
No, the bog was too near. It was just
So you
quite
could only
near.
cross over, to the
Yeah,
house.
it was up the road from us.
Okay, so it wasn't that far away.
Were you ever in Tyquin?
I was, yes. I know.
Do you know Harry? You wouldn't know. Oh, that the neighbours are gone. There
Yes,
was
yes.
walls just above us.
Yes.
Hair walls.
Yeah, I think they moved to Athenry, I think I remember. There are walls in Athenry anyway,
No.
Different
not
family
on-
then,
different
okay.
family.
Yeah, okay,
And that couldn't, the only relations was I had to in Dublin.
okay.
Whether any of them were living or not, I don't know. Then there was Murphy's further up. They were
Yes.
all gone.
Yes,
Then there was Hardim's on the other side of us. There was big house there
yes,
from the time of the landlords
yes,
and a big orchard and that.
yes.
And they were my father was related to them.
Yeah.
Hardim's a bit.
And the Hardymans were living there at the time.
They were.
Yeah, so they were the gentry
were.
class. Yeah,
Well, they weren't gentry, no, they weren't really, but
yeah, yeah.
they had got this place. The people
Okay.
that owned the place
Mm.
before them were gentry. When the
Mm.
land, when
Mm.
things were divided,
Okay, they got their share.
They would have been cousins of the Golans.
Okay, of this very place.
Very
Yeah,
place.
this
Mick
very
Golan
hotel.
and Jim Hardman were first cousins,
Right.
actually.
That's a small word,
Isn't it?
And what about another big event for the local community, as well as the stations and working about? Would it be in the harvest? Would it? Did people help each other
Oh, they
collecting the
did.
harvest?
They did. Sure, they were always helping each other.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
was
By
it?
the way, did you know any of the Kyo's from Tyquin?
No, I didn't know the Kyo's. My wife would, Septa, being from
She would,
Killaclougher,
of course.
and she went to school in Tyquin
Oh, did
just before it closed down, just in the
yeah.
70s.
Well, I went there when it opened, tell her.
Yeah, I told her that, and she said to say hi, and she moved then, and she used to cycle into Monivea School, so
Oh,
she
yes.
into the school there,
Yes.
But when the harvest happened, would people gather, and then would there be kind of communal teas for them and brown bread? Would they go back to the farm after helping out in the harvest?
Oh, they would, and they'd bring in the oats and
Yes.
things into the haggard,
Yes.
and there would be all that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And would there be any social that night? Would there be any Kayleys in the barn?
Well, maybe in some places we never had.
Yeah,
that, actually.
okay. So, but
Yeah.
everybody was very good to each other, then
Very
neighbourly,
good,
weren't they?
Very helpful.
You know. And what about if somebody died now? Where would the body be taken back to the house and the
Oh,
wake
it
be
would,
held there?
Yeah, well, they usually died in their own house.
In their own house, of course. That's
Yeah,
true, absolutely.
yeah. And there'd be a week and
Yeah, and
all the rest of it.
and the local.
And some people would stay all night with the family.
Yeah, and would the family,
And
clean up the body and dress it themselves? Or would there be a professional person in the area?
And the nurse, as far as I
Okay,
remember,
okay.
was to come. There was a district nurse or
And the wake would be held for one evening, would it?
one night.
One night,
Yeah.
Okay. And what about, say, weddings? How would weddings be in those days? Would they be held in a hotel or at the house?
A lot of them in the house.
In the house,
Yeah.
yeah. So the kind of the breakfast reception
Yeah.
would be in the house.
Cool.
And what about a honeymoon in those days? Would they have honeymoons?
They used, I think. Yeah,
Where would they go? Probably Galway or Dublin.
Galway, Killarney, I think.
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
was
Oh,
another
Killarney
place,
was
yeah.
very popular in those
Yeah.
days itself,
Yeah.
And then what about births? Would the births be in the hospital or would there be home births?
Home births.
Home births, yeah.
I know the 9 of us were,
We're all born
Born
at
at
home,
and there was a great midwife in Athenry, Mrs. Gresham.
Okay, and how would she travel to the houses? By bicycle or pony and trap? Or
They usually had it when there was a local man who had a, we'll call it a taxi. I can't
Okay, he had a car. He had a car.
He had a
He'd
car.
yeah, okay.
A Hackney car.
And Hackney car. So he would bring them around from
Yeah.
house to house,
Yeah.
you know. But you also said your uncle had a motorbike, did he?
He
That
did, Johnny.
John, they recommend you go. That must have been an unusual sight to have a motorbike at that time.
Well, it wasn't so unusual, no. There was
Okay,
quite
so there was a
around
few,
the
yeah.
place.
So that was the
Cars were scarce.
yeah, cars were
I had
scarce. Yeah.
another uncle, then Uncle Tom. He was in the building business as well,
Yes.
and he lived down in Knockmoy. He married a certain lady. She was from near Ardmore. She was a teacher, and they had. And his son is still in Galway. But you know, I've lost track even of my first cousins. Tomas Ford. He's living in Galway, and himself and his wife, Tomas and Timna. And I think Tom had a care of it. Tomas's father out very early on, like for travelling and for going to work and that kind of thing.
Where would your local market town? Would it be Monivea?
Oh, Athenry.
Oh, Athenry. So you
yeah.
go. And would you go in once a month, the family, or once a week? How would it work? Or once?
Well, I never
quarter?
remember any very much. My father and mother went, like.
Yes.
I have no
memories of going.
Yeah.
But when you went to Sunday Mass, it was in Skahana.
No, Newcastle.
Oh, Newcastle. Okay.
Skahana when I was in Dona.
Okay. And when you were in Newcastle, was there a shop there beside the church?
Tommy Whelan's.
Tommy Whelan's, yeah. And
Whelan's, we used to call it.
Yeah. So what would you get there in the shop that you?
You'd get for penny. You'd get 10 sweets, and Tommy would count them out one by one. You wouldn't get 11.
Yeah. Okay.
But you get I think it was hard yolks.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was no ice cream or anything like that. It was sweets.
No, I remember when ice cream came in. Then I was going to school in Athenry at the time, and we used to go to Jim Fahey's shop.
Yes.
And we used to get this. Well, I thought it was the most wonderful thing.
Yes.
That's still the very same, the wafers, you know.
Yeah, the wafers. So you had the wafers and the ice cream in it. It must have been such an exotic experience to taste it.
It was like now winning sweet.
So you had ice cream then when you're in secondary school, sweets, and what else would children get in the shop in those days?
What did they get?
Fruits? Would you get?
Fruit. Yeah. Well, of course, we had a lot of our own fruit, apples and corn, black currants. I remember.
Yes.
That was another thing I spent a lot of time at, pulling black currants for making jam.
Yeah, so you'd be up
and gooseberries.
Yeah, so you'd be going along the hedgerows collecting and the brambles, collecting the
berries. Yeah, well, we used to have them in the garden.
Oh, yeah, okay, and you had gooseberries as well.
Yeah, gooseberries and black currants and
what would you make from them?
As well. Jam.
Jam, okay. And tarts, would you do tarts?
Oh, loads of tarts. Yeah. So we had rhubarb.
Rhubarb as well, you know. Yeah. So really you were kind of self-sufficient with your foods, you know.
Yes.
So the only reason why you use the shops really is for things like the sweets.
Yes, and well, sometimes, although we would have our own butter, milk and butter. And
yes.
But sometimes if you were short of things, you'd maybe get butter. But I never remember buying milk.
And you know, you had your own milk, and you'd make your you had your own cream and so on. You know, exactly.
That's right.
So when you would
shortening.
And what about the porridge, the oats? That would be your own, or would you buy them at the shop?
We'd. I remember they used to, when they did the threshing.
Yes.
They'd go to bring oats down to Knockmoy.
Oh, for threshing, yes.
And they'd get oatmeal.
Yes.
They used to get about three big bags at a time.
Okay, so there's where the mill was down in Knockmoy in itself, you know. So we had we mentioned the weddings and the births and so on, and Christmas, the stations. What other highlight for the year was there?
Not wedding then.
Within the house.
There weren't too many of them at that time.
Okay.
And they were mostly at home, like.
Yeah.
The entertainment was in the home.
Yeah. So when you say the entertainment, somebody always played an instrument locally, so it was the accordion, was it, or the fiddle, or what type of instrument?
The fiddle. I remember we had a terrific fiddler in Martin Joe Burke.
Okay.
A lovely man quiet man from Licklet. Do you know Licklet Bridge?
Yes, yes, he came from there.
Yeah.
Yes. And so and singers, did you have singers as well? Would people be able
Yes,
to
there
do?
was always a few singers around.
Yeah. And and recitations was very good,
Yes,
yeah.
another
A
thing.
long poem,
Yeah.
exactly. So that was so it was kind of, it was poor life, but it was kind of community, yeah.
Then I had cousins. This was later on now when I started nursing, and I used to spend a lot of time with Monavee.
Mm.
Do you know the Fordhams?
Yeah, the Fordham shop, yeah.
Do you know, you don't have Mary Fordham, do you?
No, but my wife Septa would, okay.
She would, of course. Well,
Yeah.
Bridget Fordham, her mother, was first cousin of mine. But
Yes.
She was Bridget Kelly as well.
Yes.
And I used to love going over there.
Why was that?
Well, it was near the dance hall for one thing, across the road from it.
Oh, where was the dance hall in Monavea?
It was across from Fordham's.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't know, Bridget and myself always got on very well together.
And when you said the dance hall, what type of music? Was it always Irish, or did they play any American music?
No, they did, I think.
Yeah,
I kind of forget it, sure,
yeah,
so long
it's so long ago. But when you were in England, I'm sure Glenn Miller music, dance music, the jitterbug and stuff like that were popular.
No, I didn't go.
No, you didn't say. And what about when you were in Athenry? Was there any cinemas at the time that you went to before you went to England?
I never remember going to the cinema, but I probably did, maybe.
Probably at Athenry. And so that was, so it was the dance hall was in Monavea itself. The shop was in Monavea. Yeah, they were the big two itself.
And we had the local shop at the time, Kyo's.
Kyo's, of course, yeah.
I remember when Kyo's opened first, Neil Kyo. Lord rest him, he used to go. He'd go up to that time and to collect stuff, and with the horse and cart, and for the shop, like, and bring goods back and sell them, and out of that it all started.
Okay,
they worked very hard. They were. I don't know if you ever heard of. There was Professor Keogh at the University in Galway, who was a brother of Ned's. They were all very bright.
Yeah,
people.
very good, you know.
And there was Mrs. O'Byrne, who was another, who was sister.
Yes.
And they were very much into learning and all the rest of it.
But your uncle was very wise to recommend you go to England and not get settled down and married.
I just say special prayers for when I think of it.
Yes.
But then I met the grandest man in the world in Below Castlebar when I came back from England.
Yes, yes.
I was kind of at a loose end, and there was a priest in Monavea I was friendly with, and he said, you know, I was going to go back again nursing.
Yes.
And he said, well, would you ever think of staying in Ireland? He said, I have a friend in Castlebar, she's the matron in the county hospital.
Yes.
Miss Sheridan, and she's looking for nurses. Would you ever? Well, I said, sure, I might consider it.
Yes.
So that's brought me to Castlebar.
Yeah.
And met my husband, and the first place I saw him was in the church.
In the church, and what was he doing?
We were at evening devotions.
Yes.
And a friend of mine introduced us shortly afterwards.
Yes.
And he was Galway man as well. He was from near Kiltarn.
And what was he working at?
He was in the Department of Agriculture.
Oh, okay. So he was an inspector, was he?
He was in the land project, working with the land project.
Okay.
He was a gentleman.
Yes.
To the fingertips.
Yeah, very good. So you had a happy life then.
I had an easy life after that.
Good stuff, you know. Yeah. Okay, I think that's great. I'm not going to delay you anymore now.